Hi, I'm Sarah Veblen. I teach sewing, design, pattern making, anything to do with garment making. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Kris Haight, and she and I have done a fair amount of work together over the course of a couple of years. And I've asked her here today to have a conversation with her. You might think of it as an interview, but as a conversation with her. So Kris, welcome and thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Sarah. One of the things I enjoyed so much about our mentorship together was that you were willing to, I guess, kind of spin off, when we would be focused on something that was really concrete, like fitting, and then I would have an idea or I'd have a question about something else. You were really willing to kind of go there with me, which really, I think, inspired my learning and really helped me be more creative in my thinking and be more exploratory, as opposed to kind of just focusing on the task. So this was really fun to think about having a conversation like that with you, again, with some things that have been on my mind. And we did work together in a mentorship, and I think that was about 9 months or so, with a very specific focus, which I think was around fitting, and then kind of jumped off into various things around fabric, design, a lot of different things that to me are the part of sewing that I find the most interesting right now and the most creative. So I wanted to just focus today with a couple of questions around design and just have a conversation with you about that.
That sounds great. One thing that I enjoyed about the work that Kris and I did together was these conversations. We would say, okay, today we're going to talk about such and such. And then just in the natural course of conversation, some other thought would come up and we would, go down these side roads, and they were very fruitful, I think, for you. And they were especially interesting for me as a teacher because it helped me start to understand what your process was.
Right.
And you're developing your process in terms of garment making, but when I say it helped me understand your process, it's how your mind works, how you process information, some people go down a single path and boom, that's what they want to pursue. And you're like a river that fingers out into a lot of different tributaries.
Right.
And I think that's very good for the topic of garment making because we have so many different aspects and skill sets that we need, tools that we need in order to make a garment. And there's the sewing. I always think of now that's sort of the least part of it.
Right.
But we have the design and the fitting and the fabrications and the structure.
Right. And that for me, I think, is as I reflect back on where I started with you, I've been sewing since I was a kid, kind of on and off. And where I am today, I often feel like I go back to a topic, and I go back to a topic based on what I learned, what I've experienced, and I find myself in a little different place around that with maybe a little bit more knowledge or certainly, some learnings. And so that also is something I'm noticing around my learning is that I don't really kind of check something off and say, all right, I got that, I'm all done. That there's a circling back to reflect on that and actually to gain more knowledge and to gain more experience. And so that's really good for me as a learner, is to just recognize that that's the process and that's what happens over time for me.
And I think I was about to say in any sort of artistic field, but I don't think it's limited to artisanship. I think it's true when you really delve into any subject, that what you set out to learn, you do that, and then you learn some other things, and then you revisit that area that was perhaps your beginning point or your midpoint, and because of everything else you've been studying and experimenting with, you have a very different where you're coming at from that is different. You're in a different position. You have more skills. You've been thinking about things. I know that's true with me with fitting. I mean, when I wrote my book, I felt like, okay, I know a fair amount about fitting, But in the course of writing the book, I learned a whole lot. And since I've written the book, I've learned a whole lot. And you just circle back and, certain things get solidified and certain things you think, okay, I need to explore that more.
Yeah, and I think, for myself as a home sewer, when I think about that learning process, whether it's me as an individual or whether it's how the information is presented or how I read the information, it's really easy for me to get to a place where I think, okay, I should really have this by now, or, all right, I'm done with that, and to have it not be as, I guess, organic is the way that I would say that it feels that it is. And I think also probably do a better job at not minimizing the depth and not minimizing the width of what you really learn or what you really need to learn to get to a point where I want to be with my garment making, where I think about design, I think about fabric, I think about details, I think about construction, and all of those things that go into actually having, an awesome garment. So that I think for me in reflecting is probably one of the main things I learned is how broad and how deep actually this is.
Yeah, I think, I know for me, for sewing for as many years as I have since I was a teenager, that certainly my knowledge base has grown, but also I've I've matured, at least hopefully I've matured a little bit.
Right.
My life has certainly changed. So from being a teenager into, going to college and then in my first jobs and then becoming a mother, I feel like my wardrobe needs have changed, but what I'm comfortable in, how I like to present myself changes. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the really interesting parts of garment making is that
Mhm.
even though we feel like, okay, I'm getting close to really understanding what I'm doing now, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm really tired of wearing that type of garment. I think I want to wear something different. Or I have so many people that I work with who say, I don't know what I want to wear.
Right. Right. And that, I was talking with someone the other day and they said, what was the first garment you made? And it isn't the first garment I made, but it was the first one I was really proud of. And it was a little purple and white print jacket and then a long cord skirt that was out of this fairly heavy cotton. And I still remember being really impressed with myself. And, I have really fond memories of that. But that's clearly not something that I would wear today at
Right.
all in any way. And so that's some of what I've been thinking about lately is that you're really, for me right now, my clothes are about my sense of my identity, like who really am I and what do I want to wear? And that is so far from, cut the fabric, understand how to use your sewing machine, the hardcore kind of construction skills or even the fitting skills. It's such a bigger and a broader topic of, why do I wear these colors? Why do I like these fabrics? How do I want that garment to feel? What's the silhouette that I'm comfortable with? And it's really nice to feel like you're in charge of that instead of going to the store and seeing clothes that you think, those are not, I don't want to wear that. That's not my identity. That's someone else's identity.
Yeah. When I was doing so much custom clothing work, I did, after many years, I started to do some bridal work. And makes what I'm about to say a really good example. And so
Mm,
many gals would come to me and say, I think I want this kind of dress.
mm,
And I would listen, and they might have some pictures and some ideas. But the question that told me the most is, I would say, what do you want to feel like on your wedding day?
mm.
And I said, it's not what do you want to look like, but it's what do you want to feel like?
Right.
And as a designer for an individual, her garment, and in this case, a wedding garment, that gave me much more insight into, rather than hashing out, well, do you want the neckline this shape, or do you want the beading to be heavy, or do you want, lace on it? but having a feel for what they said that they wanted to feel like in their garment. And I had answers, everything from, I want to be Cinderella, or I want to be a princess, to I want to be extremely sophisticated, or I want to be very elegant. I had one gal say, I want to be drop down sexy. And, but to me, those were the types of words, elegant, sophisticated, fun, lively. Those were the words
Huh.
that, maybe playful. Those were the words that gave me a sense of what direction can I suggest to take them in their design. And I think you and I certainly have talked about how
Right.
the thought of designing a garment is like, wait a minute, you're asking me to design a garment.
Right. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting that you say that, because I don't actually know right now solidly how I would answer that for various garments that I'm thinking about making. Is how would I want to feel? I think I'm more right now, a little bit more in how do I want that to look?
Mhm.
I think I might have some broad ideas. So I'm wondering, were most of the people that you worked with, were they able to express how they wanted to feel? And do you think that's more unique in bridal because it is really an event? There's a lot surrounding it.
No, I don't think it's unique in bridal, because I used it in all of the work I did. I did lots of blouses, dresses, pants, jackets, skirts.
Right.
And sometimes somebody had a specific occasion, so it might be they needed a new work outfit. And so that's an appropriate question too, which
Mm-hmm.
is, what do you want to feel like when you go to work? Not
Mm-hmm.
what do you want to look like when you go to work, but what do you
Right.
want to feel like?
Mm.
And if, sometimes it was just like, professional, nothing but professional.
Right.
And other times it might be, well, I want to be professional, but I want to show my liveliness, my interest in color, that I have a certain sense of artisanship or
Huh.
artistry in my background.
Right.
Or it might be, I've had designed for people who said, I really just want to blend into the background.
Mm.
And then I would
Mhm.
say, but you're in there somewhere. And so then they would talk about them. I would get them to talk about themselves, and it'd be a quieter type of designing.
Okay. Right. This is really interesting. I just went to a funeral for someone that I worked with, and she was the ultimate professional at work. Like, everything was perfect. And she was always the best dressed person in the room, easily, no matter how many places she went to, no matter how big the room was. And when, as a woman, it was actually, I think, hard for some of us to say that, because we thought if we said she was the best dressed person in the room, people would think, well, that's really, that's a female, attribute. People are always trying to be the best dressed, and we don't want to say that about her because it will minimize her professionalism. But yet, those were hand in hand for her.
Yes.
She most definitely struck a look. And I would imagine that that came from how she wanted to feel when she was at work.
Yes. And I've had people say, in terms of making any kind of everyday garment or a special occasion garment or work garment, I want to feel that I'm approachable. I want to
Uh-huh.
feel open, that people can come to me,
Uh-huh.
and they're relaxed. I want to help them feel relaxed.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I think of it as designing from the inside out,
Right.
not from that physical, what do I want to look like, and then go inward, but I want to start
Yeah.
inside.
That's really interesting, because I don't think ever in my growing up I ever thought about my clothing that way. So, as you kind of define who you are as a young person and get out into the world a bit, I don't think I was attached to the idea of how I wanted to feel, or that I even thought through that. It was
Yeah.
always, how do I want to look? And it was because I was seeing a magazine, or I was seeing someone
Mhm.
else, or I saw a pattern and I thought, oh, that's a cool look in that pattern.
It took me a really long time to develop this. I'd been doing custom work for probably easily 5 or 7 years
Mhm.
before I started to be able to verbalize this. And where it came from was, people saying, I need a work jacket, but I still want to feel relaxed and comfortable. And to me, comfort is everything. If we're not comfortable in our garment, then
Right.
we're kind of squirrely and we want to jump out of our skin. So something I talk to my custom clients, and now I talk to my students about, is that you do want your garments comfortable. That's that physically you can move, the fabric feels good against your skin, and that you are comfortable in that style of garment
Mhm.
as
Mhm.
well. Comfort is broad
Mhm.
because I have this really strong feeling that we think our best and interact with other people our best if we're comfortable in what we're wearing.
Right.
I know for me, there are days I put something on and I think, oh, I can't go through my day in this. It's
Mhm.
got to come off. And
Mhm.
that might be, I do have some items in my wardrobe that just aren't that comfortable. I can wear them for a couple of hours and that's it. But some of it just didn't match how I was feeling that day.
Right.
But that sense that we all have had, I cannot wait to get home and take this off. That, you don't need to feel that way.
Right.
And that when we feel that way, we simply do not interact with other people and think well, and we aren't in sync with ourselves, is how
Right.
I feel about it.
Right. For me, some of that also right now, when I reflect on when I put on clothes, actually has to also do with color. There are some colors I look at and I think, oh, this is not the most beautiful color you've ever seen. And, I want to look at that, right? Or I want to see that. And then I have other clothes and I think, you're gonna have to get rid of that color because you don't like it, right? It doesn't make you feel good to actually have that color on.
Well, I think there are also colors or combinations of colors where there are days I simply don't have the energy to wear it.
Yes.
Where, today this is, pink and black, two of my favorite colors, and it's fairly striking. This
Right.
takes a fair amount of energy for me to
Right.
wear. Whereas if I had on certainly a solid black, but even a solid pink that was, a more muted pink, then it's a quieter, sort of calmer.
Right.
I can wear red, i.e. with my skin and hair tone, red looks
Mhm.
good on me. And I used to wear it a lot. I haven't worn it in years. It simply takes too much energy for me to wear it.
Right. When I'm looking at fabrics, that's often my response to different prints. I think, wow, that is too much. And I think it would be too much on me, meaning, as you said, it would be tiring to actually wear that and put that on. Similarly, probably the place in terms of feel that is the easiest for me is fabric. So I pulled out a couple of older wool gabardine trousers that I had, and I did some alterations on them to make them fit better. And the whole time I was working on them, I thought, wow, I really love this fabric. And in my lifestyle right now, I don't need a lot of pants like this. I'm not wearing a lot of wool gabardine, but there's something about the feel or the texture on that on my skin that I'm just very much drawn to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a comfort to it. There's a
Yeah.
feeling of, this feels good, or this,
Right.
there's something that resonates
Right.
within you. And so sometimes then, I would say, to a theoretical question, if somebody had said, I really love a wool gabardine, but I really don't have a need for pants
Right.
in my wardrobe, I'd say, well, think about making a wool gabardine shirt.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Why does wool gab have to be relegated to a suit or a skirt, jacket combination, or pants? Wear it, make a nice shirt out of it.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, I do think I right now when I think about fabrics, I associate them with pieces that I've had And so that then they kind of stay in that category. Like the wool gabardine for trousers. I wouldn't really ever, I think about how I would use that in a shirt. But as you say that, I think, oh, that would feel so good in a shirt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of turning things on their head, teaching yourself to think outside of the box,
Mm-hmm.
that I try to embrace. Sometimes I have to push myself, but you and I've talked about the spirit of exploration
Right.
a number of times, and that's often how I feel about my sewing now, not when I first started to sew garments.
Right.
But now it's like, okay, why not? I like wool gabardine. I'm not wearing slacks, so let's make a shirt. Let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people get very hung up in, well, I'm going to put all this time into it, and I'm going to put money into it, and because of the cost of the fabric and the other things, and time especially is precious to most of us, and a shirt's going to take a while to make. So I have to have this right.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
I can't take the chance of this not being right.
Right.
And that desire for perfectionism is really sort of squishing influence on creativity, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've trained myself, and I say that very explicitly because I was not always this way. I'm a perfectionist. I've trained myself to think, this is exploration. Let's see what happens when I make a wool gabardine shirt. I'm just going to use
Mm-hmm.
that as our example. And as long as I learn something from it, and
Right.
as long as I feel I am able to get a wear or two out of it, and that's what I'm going to be, how I'm going to be learning from it, as well as the construction. That's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
The goal isn't I have a perfect end product,
Right.
but that I get to see what it's like. And in wearing it, I might say, oh, I really like the way it feels on my arm, but I don't like the way it feels around my neck.
Right.
The learning process then is, oh, well, I can always make a collar stand and upper collar out of a different fabric. So what's against my skin feels better tactily to my skin, and maybe make facings instead of a
Right.
front placket. So I have more of that protection
Right.
against my skin. So it's if you don't, to me, how I work, if I don't make it and try it, I'll never know how much of it is going to work and how much of it doesn't work.
Right.
But once I have it and I can wear it, then I can start to do those fine tunings and think, okay, I'll make it again and it'll be even better.
The
And
other
worst
thing
case
is,
scenario is that, maybe use the first one as a layering garment.
right. Right. Or, yeah. And the other thing I was just thinking as you were saying that is that in some ways, I don't know if this is true or not, it's kind of a back door into design. So, in other words, you just said that, and I thought, oh, that would be cool, wouldn't that? A wool gabardine here, a little soft fabric here. So, when you look at things, you do Snoop shopping or, and you think, oh man, isn't that a brilliant idea that they pulled off, X, Y, and Z? But kind of starting with the idea of a wool gabardine shirt, I wouldn't ever start with the idea that I want something different on the collar. But in terms of color, in terms of texture, and in terms of feel, it really is your comfort and your identity that leads you to design versus starting with a blank piece of paper and saying, what are the cool things I could do with this garment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when I talk to students who are not geared towards design, I guess, their skill set is their sewing skill set is good. They've got a pattern that works for them now. And I start to say, I really think you're ready to start designing. Most people kind of go, oh, don't make me
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
I'm not a designer.
Yeah.
And it's, You are a designer. I mean, to me, as soon as you've picked out a pattern and picked out a fabric, you're designing, but we aren't told that. That's not reinforced in this garment making creative process most of the time.
Right.
And so then where I try to push my students and push myself is, well, maybe I'm trying to think of an example. So maybe it's a shirt pattern that I've picked out and there is no detail in it, maybe some side bust darts and waist fitting darts. And I think, yeah, I'd really like this to be have some more interest or use two different fabrics. So then I've trained myself to say, well, maybe I need to introduce a seam into the garment so that then I can do something. And I mean, none of this is pre-planned, you guys who are listening to this. Kris and I are just talking, but what I have on is a good example of this. If I were wearing this check blouse and it was all this vertical check, it would be like little railroad stripes on.
Right.
But because I wanted to turn the bodice onto the bias, I need a mechanism to do that. And so I made a yoke. It's a deep yoke, but I made a yoke. It wouldn't have to be deep. And so then you start to think, well, where on me would a deep yoke, or would a yoke look nice? Is it going to be high or a different neckline? And at that point, you're designing.
Yeah, it's so funny because right before you just started talking about that top, I was looking at that top and I was thinking, wow, I've never seen anything like that in a store. That's really a unique piece, and it's flattering in so many different ways. Like visually, it's very, very flattering in terms of how my eye is interested in what happens. And you're right. If I were to pick up just a plain kind of boxy t-shirt that was in a plaid like that, that would wear me, as opposed to you wearing a pretty pink print that highlights your face and your neck.
Right. And then there are certain things that we do in design. Some of these you and I've talked about. And I know you've done a lot of test samples with different things, but that I have a bridge fabric here is essential because it's going to help the eye flow from here to here. Let me see if I can kind of get rid of that. So without the bridge fabric, my eye at least is like, well, what's going on there? Whereas you put the bridge fabric in and it defines there's a yoke here and there's the rest, the lower bodice here. And also another design trick. And these are things that you literally can learn. There are tricks that I use all of the time. Tricks is not quite right, but changes in the garment that help the eye understand what's going on. Having a solid collar, I also have solid cuffs, contains the check, especially this on the bias, which is pretty bright. So, to my eye anyway, without that, it's like it's just floating around. Whereas with the black collar, it's containing it. Now, I could have used just a black piping. And that's going to do the same thing. So there's certain things that I use in my work over and over and over and over again, because I've learned that they work pretty well. So containing something and using bridge fabrics to lead into one fabric into another one if you're using different fabrics, or in this case, you're just trying to make the bias and the rectilinear plaid make sense. And you've played around a lot with the bridge fabrics in your wrap blouse.
I have. And that was really fun to sketch those. And then I did a couple of samples and put it on the dress form. And one of the other things I'm thinking about with what you described about the top that you have on is, I don't know if this is the right language, but it is proportionate to your frame. So it helps me. It helps me find you. I don't know if that's the right way to say that, but it helps me find you in space. You're not just floating around on this plaid. Yeah, that I think is also a real important part in design. When I look at pieces that are just really beautifully done or uniquely done, I think that's one of the things I pick up is that the scale and the proportion to the garment and to the individual is a really nice match.
Yeah, and to the individual is extremely important. It's
Right.
why I find it interesting going to stores, which I hardly ever buy clothes except for exercise clothes and jeans. But when I do go and I'll see a size range of, say, a 0 or a 2 to 16,
Right.
all using the same general style, the same style of garment, the same print, say. And I
Yeah.
think, how is that going to work?
Right.
It might look great on the size 12, 14, 16 gal, but a size 0 or 2 gal is much, there's less canvas of her. And is
Right.
that going to overwhelm her, or vice versa? Or the print makes sense on a smaller frame, but you put it on a bigger frame and it gets lost, or it just doesn't work as well. So it's all about that visual proportion
Mm-hmm.
to your frame, to your neck, to your face shape and size, to make you look overall more proportionate rather than less. And you are a really interesting example. Kris is quite a symmetric figure. I knew that starting when we worked together, but boy, did I learn just how
Right.
asymmetric she is. And we really got to the point with your basic bodice mock-up that you look pretty darn proportionate.
Right.
So that
Yeah,
there's
in one of those photos, I looked and I thought, has my scoliosis suddenly improved? And I thought, wow. And then we also have some photos where the design actually accentuated that, and it looked incredibly asymmetrical. So that was a really interesting visual experience, was to look at different, and they were small changes, to see how it either accentuated that, or I guess in some ways it might have drawn your eye away from that asymmetry. I don't know how the trick worked, but it did.
well, it's sort of, I guess you could call it sleight of hand, but it's that implies fooling or tricking the eye. And I don't think of it as that way
Okay.
as much as you're creating something that makes the eye happy.
Okay.
The eye is accepting. So many people with asymmetric figures, and it's true for lots of us who are slightly asymmetric, our neck and head are kind of put on
Yeah.
our body to the side.
Right.
That by definition means that one shoulder line is going to be longer than the other.
Right.
So the play, and you and I went through this, is where do we place the armholes on each of those sides, and where do we place the neckline?
Right.
So it doesn't mean that by ruler length, this shoulder line and this shoulder line are exactly the same.
Right.
But when the eye looks at the garment on the figure, it looks symmetric. Our
Mhm.
eyes like symmetry.
Right.
And I mean, obviously we can go into asymmetrical garments, and that's, a
Yeah.
fun, different tactic to take. But our eyes, and this has been shown over and over again, and I don't know my architecture very well, but in certain, Greek and Roman buildings, that symmetry is people like, their eyes like that.
Right.
So we're playing with proportion, and
Mhm.
sometimes an eighth of an inch difference here and 3/16 of an inch difference here can all of a sudden make it like, okay, you look pretty proportionate here.
Right. It's often surprising what a small difference is necessary for that change. That's been one of the real ahas for me. It's like, wow, an eighth of an inch. Look at that. For three, and when you think of that in terms of your whole body scale, it doesn't seem like that would make that much difference, but it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
One
was,
thing that I found in talking about people's relative sizes that when I was doing custom work, I really enjoyed, and the same is true for students who I am consulting with, whether it's helping them get a good fit or any aspect of garment construction, because I am so relatively slight. I
Right.
have height, but I don't have very much width, and I don't have very much mass on me. So I feel like I don't have a very big canvas here.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas women who are larger,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can do things with design on them that I can't possibly pull off
Right.
simply because their canvas is bigger. They have it's like artist who paints,
Right.
they've got a canvas like this, and I only have a canvas like this. It's hard
Right.
to squish in a whole lot on that
Right.
smaller canvas.
Right.
And so proportion becomes a very different exercise,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the same rules of thumb apply. You
And
just have a
that,
different
it's
scale.
interesting to kind of think about that idea of canvas and artwork, because it is really easy to think about a really large canvas and the scale and the color and the drama that you can put on that versus something that is a miniature, and what you actually have room for and what kind of goes with that canvas. And I don't really necessarily think about my body as a canvas, but actually it is. I think of my dress form as a canvas. I'll drape some fabric on there, but I think to be able to think of your body that way might also be really helpful in terms of thinking about design and really looking at it that way, as opposed to driving into a trouser or a shirt or really getting narrow in terms of the garment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I've talked about in the past how important I feel it is to do what I refer to as mirror play. So if
Yes.
we do have a piece of fabric, how do we decide what we're going to make out of it? Or if we have a pattern in mind and we're looking for fabric, the same type of thing. You can go either direction.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to start with fabric and then decide to what to make out of it. And I guess that's because I buy fabric and I think, oh, I don't know what I'm going to make. I'll figure it out sooner or later. But I stand in front of the mirror a lot with that. It's one thing to drape that fabric and experiment and play with it on a dress form, and it doesn't have to be your particular body on the dress form, just having something to look at. But
Mhm.
I find the mirror play, standing in front of a mirror, draping the fabric, let it hang over me, pull it taut, then put some pleats in it, gather it up at the waist, do pleats. That tells me so much about what the fabric's qualities are and what
Mhm.
does it naturally want to do? What does it do best? And there's a certain I often feel like I want to honor that in the fabric. I
Uh-huh.
want to take its qualities, its natural qualities, what it's going to do best, and work with that rather than turn it into something else. And that being said, there are plenty of times I've taken a fabric, a sort of really soft linen, and I want to make pants out of it. I might underline it and I turn it
Mhm.
into something else.
Mhm.
That might be because the color is perfect or
Mhm.
whatever. But
Mhm.
that mirror play, I might spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then I might go back to it then a few days later and spend another 5 or 10 or 15 or 20. But it's in that play that I start to get a real understanding for what the fabric can do, what it wants to do, and then what do I want to make it do?
And so are those questions that are in your mind as you're doing that, or are you primarily observing in a broader way?
I'm mostly observing it.
Mhm.
I have certain things that I always do. So I will always, I won't have anything but my undergarments on, and I'll take the fabric and I'll put it around myself and put, maybe, clip it back here. So if it was a relatively form-fitting, not super tight, but form-fitting garment, what does that look like?
Uh-huh.
And then I might put scoot it in a little bit so that it will flow a little bit more. And then I might gather it. I often gather it or then pleat it at the waist. So I can see that drop. I'll have it go from my waist to the floor. I'm not going to make a full length dress, skirt or dress, but I want to see how the fabric hangs and what the difference is between gathers and pleats. Because when you gather some fabrics, even though it's soft and drapey, when you gather it, you actually get some volume. You've gathered up against here, but you end up with a volume out. So then I might say, okay, then let's see what happens when I pleat it instead. And I don't make many gathered garments and I don't make many pleated garments, but it's informing, my hands are learning and my eyes are seeing what that fabric can do. I almost always will hang a fabric on the bias against my body as well. Just so it's like I'm getting to know the fabric. I want to see what it's all about. I want it to give me some feedback about what, as I said, what I can, it naturally wants to do, and then what can I make it do?
And this is really about the qualities of the fabric, not the color or the pattern. This is really a textile experimentation that you're doing.
Right. And then after doing that, I certainly start to look at the color. Do I want the color by my face? Do I want it high up by my face? Do I want it more open by my face? I might then say, okay, I really love the color, but it's not great next to my face. So I might pull some other fabrics out and say, okay, so what if I had this fabric here and the fabric, the main fabric down below?
Do you also reflect a little bit on how much of that fabric you want? In other words, is this a top and a bottom, or is it in terms of both your body scale and what the fabric looks like?
Yeah. So do I want to, there's some fabrics I think, well, I thought I was going to make a skirt, or excuse me, make a dress or a top that I was going to have it up here, and then playing with it, I think, that's not that good up here. I'm going to put it on the bottom, and then I think, okay, so I'll make a skirt or pants or use it with other fabrics in different garment components.
Right.
So I might introduce a side panel into a garment and put it here.
Right.
And there are certain fabrics, I think, I've been enamored of this fabric for so long, and then I start playing with it. I think, oh, was it really not very good for you in terms of my skin color, or, it could just be that over time I've grown away from that.
Yes.
That tells you how long I keep certain things.
Yes. Oh, no. I mean, I think we all do that, right? You have a fabric you bought years ago and you're just attached to it, and then you pull it out and you think, wow, times have changed for me, and this may not be really what I would wear right now in any way.
Yeah. And so then you make the decision, well, do I want to pass it on to somebody else, or can I use it as a garment that I will enjoy and get some wear out of? It's just, I'm using only part of it, or I'm using it on the bottom rather than on the top.
Right. These 6 yards that I bought 20 years ago that I love, can I use enough small pieces on, every single garment I make for the next 10 years?
Yeah, exactly. And there have been plenty of times that I'll have a fabric in my collection for a while, and I'll think, I'm really interested in using this. I'll think, you're really only going to use a small portion of it built into another garment. And that's where I think we have to let go of what that original idea was, because I very often will think, oh, this would make a great dress.
Yes.
And then as I start to experiment with it, it's like, I don't know that it's going to be a great dress after all. So how do you shake that idea loose?
Yeah.
And sort of come back to it and let your mind be free enough to say, well, what else could I do with it?
Yeah, I think that is really, really hard. because at least for me, I have a sense when I buy a fabric of what I want to make out of it. I look at it and I say, your dress or your pants, something like that. And then I have tried probably, the fabric exercise that you described, maybe 10% of what you do. I haven't done that religiously. And I look at it and I think, wow, that is dead wrong.
Well,
That
you did that series of I don't know how many fabrics you have. I feel like there were 8 or 9 fabrics.
you mean the last time I saw you?
Yeah. And
Yes.
does it go on the top or the bottom, and how do
Yes.
they pair together?
Yes. Yeah,
And
that was really probably one of the most insightful things I did around my collection, was to bring you and then the other folks who were there, a group of fabrics, and then just talk through, what do you see? What could it be? How would you use it? And one of the gals who sat with us saw things in the fabric that I hadn't seen, which was so helpful. It was like, wow, really, I missed that. So that actually for me would be something I'd like to replicate. And I don't think I have to replicate it with people who know how to sew or people who are interested in garments. I have some friends that have really good eyes and interesting, they see things that I don't see. So I think I might like to do that with them as well and get feedback in terms of getting away from the one thing you think you're going to do with that.
yeah, that's a really good, and I agree with you. It does not have to be sewers. It can be just, friends that you feel like they have a good eye for color. They, as you said, they look at things differently than you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think also taking pictures can be helpful.
Hmm.
For me, it can be, because then I can put side by sides. I could get two or three things. So I may have a fabric and I put it on my dress form as though it were going to be a shirt with a jacket over it, and then
Right.
something for the bottom. And then I mix them up and I try a different combination, the same 3 fabrics, but we are arranging them on the body differently. And then if you do your homework, take those pictures and you can put them on your screen or print them out. I often print things out. I'm still old-fashioned, I guess. But and look at them, and very often I work from I almost said the negative, but that's not really right. I'll work from, I don't like this at all.
Uh,
So it can go away,
right.
but I like, I'm not sure which of these remaining 2 that I do like,
Hmm.
but I get rid of the one that's, I know that doesn't work
Do you ever ask yourself why that doesn't work?
all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
Because
that's how you're going to develop a vocabulary and
right.
develop your design eye.
Because in some ways that's the easier C, is, oh my God, I don't like that. And then you just really focus on the ones that you like and proceed with that. But there must be something about that we can understand, so that we carry that forward. Things like, for me, too much color contrast
Yeah.
that breaks the body into a top and a bottom.
Yeah, that was going to be the first thing that I said.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes in that case, what you, instead of having a blouse that then you would wear with skirt or trousers and then maybe a cardigan over it, maybe what you need to do is make a dress, so that you
Right.
have that fabric is uniform on the body, and then combine something as a
Mhm.
topper over it.
One of the things around fabric play and use of as you describe it, and then use of the dress form, that has been revolutionary for me, is to look at fabric the way that it would be on the body versus on a table. I never really recognized until, a while back, how different it looks in terms of the color, in terms of the sheen. And that's absolutely critical, to be able to see it upright instead of horizontal.
Yeah, I think so. I think I made a lot of bad judgments early on, because I was just working with fabric on
Yeah.
the table,
Yeah.
and certainly getting it on the dress form is is good, and that's a good way to work. Putting it on yourself and looking in a mirror is good, but it's like with corduroy or velvet or something. You can't put it against your body and look down because of the nap. You're going to have a totally different understanding of the color than if you look in the mirror and see the reflection back or take a picture.
Yes.
And so that you see nap down, nap up,
Right.
what those differences are going to be. But, and if you don't have a dress form, you don't need one. I've pinned fabrics to curtains before.
Right.
And it's just that you need something to hang it on. You could put it on coat hangers and let it be hanging down.
Right. Right. So do you have students that you've worked with over years who you've seen progress in this way, where you feel like now they have a sense of their identity? They can easily go to, how do I want my clothes to feel? Something where you saw a clear progression, or maybe even just a clear difference between where they started and where they are now in terms of actual design, whether they call it that or not. Can you describe, like, do you have some examples, or describe what that looked like for them?
The first thing I will say, as a teacher, it's the most rewarding thing ever.
Oh.
I feel like, sort of, I'm a parent. I have 3 grown girls. I have a gaggle of grandkids now. But to me, when my kids were going off to college, and other parents would say, "Aren't you worried? I feel like I'm just going to cry for weeks." I said, "No, I mean, I've been working for this since they were born to launch them."
Right.
And similarly, when I'm working closely with a student, and that might be temporarily, or it might be on and off for a long time or a short time, but it's on and off, to see them start to grasp some of these concepts that I play around with, and they resonate with them, so that they do begin to design on their own. To me, it's just the best thing ever. And it's not, sometimes I think, oh, I'm not going to get to work with them anymore because they don't really need me. And, that's the sadness in that is only because I really enjoyed their working with them. But in terms of that, they are, they're launching and they're able to do this.
Right.
Definitely. And I feel there are a couple of gals I've worked with, I feel like that they've outstripped me. I mean, their design is just so wonderful, and use of color is, so different from mine, and it's playful, or it is a hard launch, though. When I say hard, it's difficult. It is the thing that I certainly, fitting takes a lot of our time, learning pattern making, all of these aspects of garment sewing, which hopefully you and I can talk about in other conversations. But this movement then into actually designing for yourself is very difficult for a lot of people. It's a very slow process. And I've had a few students that I've worked with in mentorship or on an ongoing basis that I feel like, for months, and some of them for years, I've been saying, stop buying patterns. You've got your patterns. Start to design. And I think I'm learning. I can't say start to design, because they go, I can't design. It's a scary word. But I have tried to develop ways to lead them into it. So, for instance, I might say, why don't you make a collection, Pinterest or magazine, rip out pictures from magazine. I use Pinterest because I feel like there's so much available there, or any kind of digital photo. Why don't you find at least 10 to 15 different necklines that are nice to you and along the are appealing to you, that you think you might be able to wear. It's not that you can, but that
Right.
they're interesting to you. And alongside that, I very often will say, well, why don't you also, any that you rule out, I don't want to do this, put that in a separate file.
Mm.
So then we have our possibles, and then we have this, I don't think I ever really want those.
Right.
And so by giving them that exercise, I get them to start to focus in on one aspect of designing a garment, which is a
Right.
neckline.
Right.
And anything that goes on our upper body is going to have a neckline.
Mhm.
So from turtlenecks to cowl necks to, you name it. I mean, there are hundreds of different neckline shapes.
Mhm.
And it can, line drawings are good, but a combination of line drawings and photographs of garments.
Mhm.
And then there's the offshoot of that exercise is after they've gotten that first kind of collection done, is now as you continue to look at necklines and you see something and you think, that's almost, I can almost see that would be good. Collect that and print it off and put tracing paper on top of it and start to sketch what could you do to change it to make it better for you.
Mm.
And then the sort of the next step in that process is, okay, you've got a master t-shirt pattern, you have a master woven pattern, so make one up in muslin. You don't have to have sleeves in it, just make it up so that you either have a front opening or on the fold, depending on the garment, and translate the neckline onto your muslin on your body.
Mhm.
And then play with the variables. All necklines to me have variables. I break
Mhm.
this down a lot. So how close or far away it is from the neck at the shoulder line, how deep the neckline is, how wide the neckline is, and then the shape of the neckline. Is it a curved line? Is it a straight line? Is it a combination? Is it curved and then comes down straight, or whatever those are? And
Go
you and I
ahead.
were talking about that 1/8 of an inch difference.
Yeah.
Sometimes an 1/8 of an inch lower, all of a sudden you think, oh, that could be a possibility. Whereas an 1/8 of an inch higher was like, I would never wear this.
Well, and the part that strikes me as you're describing that is, when you've sewn from patterns, forever, which is what most of us have done, you're given this thing and you just assume that it's right. And then I've done some of this with you in terms of sketching and in terms of collecting pictures on Pinterest. And the real discovery is, wow, I have control of that. I could change that. And that's just like, earth shattering. I don't know why, but it is. You buy clothes and it has a V neckline and it ends here. You buy something else and it ends here, and you just accept that. You don't think, well, what do I think would look best on me, or what am I comfortable with? Is this too high and it feels too tight? Is this too low? So it seems like such a simple thing. But it's really quite revolutionary.
It is. And very often for me as a teacher, the extension of this whole progress of exercises or process of exercises is then say, pick 3 necklines and fiddle with them until you get, where the height, all your different variables are nice, or you think that they're going to work, and make up 3 shirts.
Right.
And, they can be print, they can be solids. It's not that you're going to take muslin and make them all. I mean, you could do that, but
Right.
me, if you have a master pattern, so you've got the amount of ease in it that you like, all of that good stuff of a master pattern, all you're doing is changing the neckline. So, you might have a different front and back and different facings, but
Right.
everything else is pretty much of a go in the garment. And what you're going to end up with is 3 garments that you get to wear.
Right.
And they may not be the most creative or the most you might not be dancing across the room thinking this is the best thing I've ever done, but in wearing those you can start to collect data. You can start to say, yes, this neckline works really well because I love this necklace. I wear it a lot and
Right.
it works. But when I wear this other neckline, I have to change my necklace, or I wear earrings instead of a necklace, or I
Right.
like to put a scarf on. And so then you start to collect I think of these, I said data, I think of it as all clues. You're collecting little clues as to what works for you.
It's so funny because earlier you said all you have to all that you've changed here is the neckline, and that just for those of us that don't feel comfortable with that yet, just kind of like dread. It's like, oh my God, the neckline! I'm changing the neckline. But in a lot of ways, when you step back, you think that is a relatively minor change, right?
It
If I
is.
know that the bust fits, the shoulders are in the right spot, the back fits well, why can't I adjust that?
Right. And
Don't
so
I adjust that?
I would ask you, what makes your heart go thump a thump? Was it, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this, or I don't have the skills to do it, or
I'm not supposed to be doing this, and I don't feel like I have the skills to do that. And right now for me, that's not true because I did the wrap top muslin with you, and lo and behold, I did one up and I created a facing, and wow, it worked. I mean, I looked in the mirror and I, of course, expected it to be horrible. Never worked. And I looked in the mirror and I went, wow, that actually worked.
yeah.
So I think it is because it's so unknown. It's just not a place that I've traveled before. It's not something I've ever done. And you assume that all this expertise by designers and pattern making companies, are things that you can't learn, things that you're not able to, act on. Yeah.
You do. You have the skill set you need to do it. You know your ruler work. You know that you can move your ruler, your fashion styling design ruler around to get a slightly different curve or a different, soft straight or hard straight where you want it.
Right.
You have the ruler work.
Right.
You have a muslin where you've blocked it out and played with tape or pins or friction pens so that you've drawn it on.
Right.
You found what you wanted. So and then really the only remaining skills that you need is that you know how to make a facing. It's a
Right.
pretty straightforward process.
Right.
Do you know how to sew a facing? I have an old Threads article about all of the little steps
Right.
that you need to sew a facing. I love sewing facings because if you do all of those little steps, it's going to turn out. And that, boy, that's a big win that, I
Yes.
don't have that pit in the bottom of my stomach thinking, I don't know if this is going to work out. A facing is pretty surefire. So
Right.
the only, I'm just going to put in a little disclaimer here for people listening to us. If you do a really low neckline or a neckline that comes down over your breast tissue, you may have to do some fitting. But as long
Right.
as you're up on the sort of solid part of the body,
Yeah.
you can pretty much do any neckline change that you want.
I was just thinking the other part that causes me trepidation is not having complete confidence in my ability to see. And what I mean by that is a lot of what I feel like we've been doing together is helping me look, right? And actually see, oh, that looks asymmetrical. Oh, that doesn't look asymmetrical. Or that's attractive. Or no, that's not attractive, in my opinion. So the actual looking, I think, is a very specific skill that in order to get to the place where you've described your students, you're so excited by their work, they really have honed the ability to look for themselves at how they want to look, what they want it to be, colors they like. They've put all of that skill together to see what they want to create.
I think I don't know. I wouldn't use the past tense that they have honed those skills. I think they
Okay.
are in the process of honing them. They're willing to take the chance or the opportunity to hone those skills. And
Right.
the best way to hone them is by doing it. It's
Right.
not by studying more, it's by
Right.
actually making the garment and wearing it. And as you do that, each of those I think one reason I say 3 necklines, 3 garments is usually by the end of the 3rd garment, you're going to feel a whole lot more comfortable with the process of changing your neckline
Mm,
and making your facing and having that confidence. Well, it's all up in this area.
right.
It's not going to alter my fit. So I'm going to have a garment that I can wear.
Right.
And I can always learn, okay, I wish that the neckline were a little less wide right in here or a little wider here, whatever it is. You can always
Mhm.
make changes to your next garment. But meanwhile, you've got a garment you can wear and you're solidifying each time you do that, you're solidifying that entire set of skills
Mhm.
of designing, transferring to your pattern, making your facings. You're getting that skill over and over again, and you're building the confidence. This really does work.
Mhm. I
And for
think
most
you're
people, 3 to 5
yeah,
renditions, and they think, okay, I have this process down.
yeah. And part of that, as you're describing it, I think is also reinforcing, okay, that's it. And then that's not it. Just similar to what we talked about in terms of fabric combinations, that it is sometimes easier to say, no, that one wasn't it. But then you can move forward and detail the ones that you think are closer to the ideal or are at least very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about too, our what we like changes. I have a few
Mhm.
blouses that I have a little bit less wide neckline, a little bit higher. A couple of them were for a very specific purpose. I still wear them and am happy to wear them, but they aren't the best for me, in my opinion now. But
Mhm.
that's okay. You know,
Mhm.
I always enjoy the fabric. I enjoy how it feels. And I think I think really what I'm trying to get at is part of the process of learning to design is letting yourself take the enjoyment that you actually thought this through, you experimented,
Mhm.
you then produced it, and hey, look, I've got something on that I made that I can wear and I'm interested in it.
Right.
That I furthered my skill set by
Right.
doing it.
Right. As opposed to this is a perfect garment in all ways, and kind of that product check that some of us are geared towards. So the funeral that I went to the other day for the friend of mine who dressed so well, I wore 3 things that I made. And that was really important to me. And I dressed in a way that she would dress. She and I were not that different. But I also thought, isn't this really wonderful that I can wear pants, a jacket, and then I knit my own top? And some of that was also just a kind of an appreciation for her and her style.
Mhm.
But that was really, really nice to be able to walk out of the door in those clothes.
Right. You honored her through what you were wearing, and
Right.
in a way that honors your process
Right.
as well.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah.
I feel like we probably should wrap up because
Yep. That
we
sounds
could keep
great.
on going. And we, to the audience, whoever is watching this, Kris and I are going to do several different conversations like this. We hope that you have enjoyed this as much as we have.
Yeah.
And if there are things that you would like us to talk about, please email me and let me know what they are. and we will certainly consider it. And there are, I enjoy this format of relatively informal conversation and seeing where it takes us. So there are other people that I am thinking of asking to interview me. But if you think, oh, I'd really like to interview Sarah, let me know that too. So I hope everybody can embrace the process of design and start to feel more comfortable experimenting and getting enjoyment from that experimentation.
Right. I'm excited to sew some more right now.
Oh, good. I can't wait to see what you make.
I am.
All
Thanks
right.
very
Thanks,
much, Sarah.
everybody. Thank you, Kris.
Thanks, Sarah.